We knew we wanted this to be this gritty, dark, edgy, disgusting world, just like a real roach's world.
I mean, this was a gross game.
Anything that's gross or disgusting has this kind of self-developing notoriety.
In the beginning, we got totally caught up in this. One of the first things we thought about was the kitchen of this bar/restaurant, because we worked in a restaurant.
One of the hard parts about doing a game in 1995 was that, on a PC especially, was that we were working in a 256 color environment.
We wanted it to be hyper-realistic. We wanted it to be exactly like you were a cockroach. The stainless steel countertops and the tile floor and all this spilled grease and bacon and all these things that we had seen cockroaches crawling on when we were busboys in this restaurant.
We tried doing everything in the 3D applications, and we were discovering that, well, at the time, I mean, 3D applications were a lot more primitive than they are now.
You know, I had a Power Mac 8100 that had 96 megs of RAM, and that was the most RAM anyone had ever heard of in a computer. I think the RAM cost more than the computer cost.
We telescoped out our work schedule at that point and figured we would have been done with the show about now.
We were never really good at planning things out. Really, our backgrounds were as filmmakers, and we were good at making something visually compelling. We created this little cardboard jig, that was basically a screen. And we would take this jig and we'd move it around and look at things and look at the floor and put it over objects and on countertops, getting on our hands and knees. In fact, getting on our bellies and crawling. You know, looking at the floor and thinking about how cool it would be to show this, how cool it would be to show that. We call it driving the roach. So rather than sit down and come up with a design document, which you would do today, you know, you would probably spend months and months in development just on creating a design document that would tell the artists and the engineers what to do. We didn't do that. And we test an idea out visually just to see how something would navigate or how something would look, how it would work, how we would light it, how it would play on screen.
It's actually a big pain just to develop colors that were kind of close to each other so we could have something that looked good in 256 colors.
We wanted the player to be able to explore every square inch of this apartment building, everything. And just explore, you know, let's let the person go out and explore everything, underneath the rug, underneath the table, under the hot water heater. Every wall, every ceiling, every floor, every table, every chair, everything was going to be navigable. We quickly realized that this was just going to, for two reasons, was just not going to work. First of all, the artwork would never fit on one CD. We knew we wanted it to be on one CD. It would take forever for us to produce it. And also, it would just be too boring. You know, navigating across a giant cinder block wall sucks. It's not fun.
Vinny and I were looking at the notes that we had early on. We had like health meters and we had inventory, and you were going to hook up with other roaches and breed, and there was a lot of like asset or resource management in the game. And ultimately what happened was we were essentially a year out and we were still like figuring out what the game was, and so we said, let's strip away all that stuff. It's all gone.
Phil and I reached the point where we had said, okay, enough's enough. You know, we can spend 6 weeks modeling a stick, or we can just go out down the block and take a picture of one. And that's where the infusion between the 3D and the photographic stuff started developing. This was high concept. We ran out of time, and we decided that, well, he's getting closer to being a real human being. He should have photographic stuff around him to kind of show his journey. Basically, we punted.
We came up with the concept of what we called islands of activity. So the gameplay would take place in these little islands, and you would, you know, traverse from island to island with your cockroach. So you wouldn't have to go through, you know, 30 screens of blank floor to get to the next island. You would go across 3. So we kind of truncated the world, you know, and took some shortcuts.
The whole game takes place in this San Francisco waterfront dingy bar, Eddie Petito's bar. And we locked ourselves in a room for, I don't know how long it was, 2 weeks, a week, I forget. We just hashed out the whole game.
The hallmark of an adventure game is that there's a puzzle. The player has to solve some sort of visual riddle in the game world in order to move on to the next level.
We would draw it all out on paper, and sometimes I would make massing models in Swivel. I would just mock up what we thought the room would look like and what you were going to do.
We hated the idea of puzzles that were removed from the natural game environment. We wanted to make sure that all of the puzzles were seamlessly integrated into the game environment, so you were never removed from it. So everything was restricted by what could a cockroach really do?
A cockroach can only do so many things.
Ultimately, it was 4 keys. You drive a roach, that's it. And we did that, ultimately, I think we did it at first because we felt it was our safest bet to get the game done. But as a side effect, it allowed us as designers to, it set up a bunch of limitations for us, but that was good because it corralled us to thinking about only like what we could do as a roach.
I remember just pulling our hair out trying to think of things that roaches could do.
It wasn't much. You could push things, you could, you know, the weight of the roach could cause you to do things.
A lot of the puzzles in Bad Mojo are what we called like these Rube Goldberg-esque Byzantine sort of action-reaction puzzles where you do something on one screen that has an effect on something many screens in the future or somewhere else in the game. On every level in the game are animals.
This guy's house is just filled with critters. There's like slugs, there's mice, there's termites, there's silverfish, there's ants. It's packed full of stuff.
And all the animals were in some fashion enchanted, and they had information that they were able to give you, the cockroach, to help you on your journey. Phil and Vinny and I would go and sit down, and Vinny would have written a riddle by this time that was kind of pseudo-poetic, and we would try to fit the assets we had, you know, for instance, vacuum cleaners or rats or cockroaches or whatever, into a kind of a dreamlike, kind of pre-Big Lebowski sort of montage of visual and audio clues.
We use movies, clues, written text, objects. In some cases, the player interacts with photographs. And from very early on, we really love this idea of living photographs. You would see a photograph and you'd crawl over it, and that would cause a small movie to play, you know, within the bounds of the photograph itself. And you'd see this little snippet, you know, this little moment from the life of the character in the photograph.